Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 13th of April 2024. I say third part, the first part has not yet been published because YouTube have restricted it every time I've uploaded it. I've now blurred literally everything that I can think of. And it's just been restricted again. I think it's just the bots are making a mistake, they're misidentifying something in it. All I can think of now is the final video at the end is of some puppies being rescued from a bomb site, and it's absolutely endearing and lovely. But maybe YouTube's mistaking that for something horrible. It's making no sense, and I've wasted so much time on trying to make that video acceptable to YouTube. Everything is blurred out, and it's still restricting it, and it's so frustrating. Because you cut time sensitive videos like mine that have to be looked at on the day they are released. Because they're newsworthy. Well, when you put an appeal in, if that appeal gets overturned, it takes like 2 to 3 days. Well, no one's going to watch my daily hits and losses video 2 or 3 days late. So I really don't know what to do about that. It's so frustrating, and I think they just flagged it now that every time I upload, and I've even cut 2 whole bits out that don't need to be cut out. It just Anyway, rant over. So we'll go on to geopolitics and I'll work out what I'm going to do with that. We'll start with France, Macron and Germany. Macron has spoken to Scholz, so the French and German leaders have spoken via video conference. Quote, the two leaders have reaffirmed their unwavering and long-term support for Ukraine and followed up on the work of the conference in support of Ukraine held in Paris on 26th of February and the Weimar summit held, that's with Poland, in Berlin on the 15th of March. They also discussed European initiatives for military assistance to Ukraine. Scholz and Macron addressed the relationship between the European Union and China and agreed in particular to defend a rebalancing of Euro-Chinese trade relations and to highlight the implications of the war in Ukraine for European security. As mentioned in my military equipment video, the Chinese are massively aiding Russia now. It's got to levels that far exceed what we previously thought, and they're helping them to basically manufacture all sorts of weapons. And in my opinion, that is an absolute game changer. It's a full-on game changer for the outcome of this war. Like I've said many times, the only way Russia win this war or prevail in this war is if Russia get involved. And the only way Russia prevail is if China get involved, and China are involved to a massive extent. Remaining on France, this is the French Prime Minister, not the President, saying we'll keep support to resist against Russia because after Ukraine, it's the EU and many EU countries are scared. It's true, we need to do more, says Attal, the French Prime Minister. I don't want to meddle in US internal politics and the election, but we need to depend mostly on ourselves. That is self-evidently true. The US have given no meaningful aid. They have given little bits of 100 million, 200 million. I think 300 million was the biggest one in presidential drawdown authority. But nothing meaningful since August. So this is 6 months plus. October, that's 7 months now of no aid. Stay calm. Ukrainian World Congress delegation has met with President Zelensky. During a meeting held in Ukrainian city of Chernivtsi, they discussed key initiatives and support for Ukraine. Quite sure what the World Congress is. Delegation from the Ukrainian World Congress, led by its President Paul Grod, held an official meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It doesn't really say what that group seeks to do or what it is, but it's Ukrainian World Congress. So that is, I presume, diaspora communities of Ukraine around the world being represented by that organization and then speaking to Zelensky. Zelensky has said himself, there are things that are clear, and I'm 100% sure that this will be the case. Ukraine in 5 to 10 years will be an EU country. I very much believe a NATO country as well. I'm sure that many countries will rebuild Ukraine. 5 to 10 years, so we're thinking 2024 now, so that's 2030 and beyond. That's pretty much what most people are saying, that it won't be before 2030 that the EU will accept, or that Ukraine will be able to accede to the EU. Ukraine and Slovakia are to expedite a removal of unilateral restrictions on Ukrainian agricultural products. I don't quite understand this from the Euromaidan press. I don't know whether this is the wrong wording, because there are what people like the Slovakians are arguing for are restrictions on Ukrainian stuff. So if this is expediting the removal of unilateral restrictions, that would surely not make hauliers and farmers happy in Slovakia. So I don't know. The move comes in the wake of concerns raised by several EU countries regarding the impact of Ukrainian grain on their local markets. Moving on though, Ilya Ponomarenko, the former Kiev Independent journalist, says from the creators of Kiev will fall within 72 hours. Resistance is futile. Russia is too big to fall. Western weapons won't make any difference. Kiev was just a feint, blah, blah, blah. All these kind of pro-Russian claims. This stubborn and blind opposition to reality, as well as a weird drive to humiliate America by making it kneel before the abomination of humankind that is Vladimir Putin, is really staggering. So this is The Hill reporting that Senator J.D. Vance, who's been touted as a running mate for Donald Trump in his run for president, has laid out his opposition. I mean, I don't like this guy. He's Ohio senator. And he's a veteran as well. Not that means anything. Someone's pointing out to me recently that they knew loads of veterans and only 2 of them were pro-Ukraine. Everyone else was weirdly pro-Russia. The Senate, I mean, it just gets mixed up into partisan politics, unfortunately, and it's just the disinformation that's coming through. And we're going to talk more again, obviously, about disinformation in a minute. In a minute, Senator J.D. Vance has laid out his opposition to providing Ukraine with more aid, arguing that even if Congress passes another $60 billion in assistance, it won't change the course of the war. Vance believes Ukraine can't win. Well, not if you don't help, and not if something absolutely meaningful and substantive is done with the Chinese support of Russia. Yeah, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They can't win. Yeah, but you're tying their hands behind their back. Yeah, because they can't win. Yeah, but that's because you're tying their hands back. Yeah, because they can't win. Right, with the leader of the House. So what's happened recently is Marjorie Taylor Greene has been holding a gun to Mike Johnson's head. Mike Johnson has gone to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has broadly sided, sort of, with Mike Johnson in saying he's not a big fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene having a motion to vacate the seat. So that's kind of siding with Johnson, but I think this is kind of everyone's really just obsequious and kneeling to the altar of Donald Trump. Now, I almost forgot to add this. This is on the back of Speaker Johnson, this was reported before meeting with Trump, to meet with Trump, offers Marjorie Taylor Greene advisory role as his own job teeters. This is the idea that Mike Johnson had 2 choices, right? He could either say, screw you, Marjorie Taylor Greene, stop doing this to me. I'm going to go basically to the Democrats to try and save me from having my position vacated. And that means we'll do some bipartisan work to get stuff done, such as Ukraine aid. But he'll have to have the help of Democrats with that, and some Republicans who have been very strong in supporting him against not really strong. They haven't overtly criticised Marjorie Taylor Greene, but they said that's the wrong thing to do, and they stand with Mike Johnson. So that's one option. The other option is to go to Marjorie Taylor Greene and to do that via Trump. And to say, right, rather have my enemies close to me. And she's a MAGA Republican. He's called MAGA Mike by many. So he's a MAGA Republican. They're just having this infight about him actually doing bipartisan work as a speaker. That's his kind of job. That's literally how you govern, especially when you have a majority of only one. And he recognises that, but he also realises that the Freedom Caucus and the MAGA movement is holding him to ransom. So he's now offered Marjorie Taylor Greene a seat at his own kitchen cabinet, as he says, as he draws closer to the MAGA forces that now dominate the GOP. So taking her on as an advisor, as she said, nothing. You will lose your job if you give any aid to Ukraine. So he's now taking her on as an advisor. There will be no aid to Ukraine. This is Mike Johnson. I mean, there are talks about loans and stuff now, so there is potentially an option, but I don't know how that works with Marjorie Taylor Greene. given what she has very, very clearly said. So, uh, yeah, it's really deeply depressing what is going on. Now, he's gone to meet with Donald Trump, and Shashank Joshi from The Economist here says, with the leader of the House actively subverting American democracy, who needs foreign disinformation? So there's awful lot of stuff going on here. Now, if you guys are still believing that there was widespread election fraud during the 2020 elections, then we're just going to be talking across each other. It's been legally found in court case after court case that hasn't happened. And in fact, Fox have been taken to court and have settled out of court for $884 million, like a massive amount to Dominion, and they still have a court case outstanding with Smartmatic. And they admitted, and we know due to released leaked emails and texts and WhatsApp messages from people like Tucker Carlson, that they knew they were lying about it. They were lying about there being widespread fraud. And yet still people are going on about this. And we know, I suggest you read Liz Cheney's book, Oath and Honor, where she, as a Republican, stood up for her principles and stood up for democracy and rightfully went to town on looking at the January the 6th insurrection. And she cites Mike Johnson as being, and she details what he did, right? Mike Johnson is not a good person, right? And he was one of the big ones working for Trump against democratic integrity, right? So this article says Mike Johnson, for his part, offered on Friday a high-profile backing of Mr. Trump's allegations of voter fraud, which have already been found to be false. And he's come out and said, voter fraud. This is exactly what the Kremlin want. This is exactly the rhetoric that plays to what Vladimir Putin wants. So he's given a high-profile backing of Mr. Trump's allegation of voter fraud, giving them public support. Mr. Johnson played a significant role in supporting Mr. Trump's false claim and that he won in 2020. Again, see Liz Cheney's book where she details that and brings the receipts. Including all I'm listening to, but I haven't finished it yet. But a lot of audio in the book that is audio recordings of what people like Mike Johnson say, recruiting House Republicans to sign a legal brief, and apparently it's a very bad amicus brief that supported a lawsuit seeking to overturn the election results. Right, so that's really what this was about. He went to meet Trump for no other reason to fawn to Trump and then get down on his knees in front of Trump in kind of praise as his new god. No longer is he the Christian nationalist, he is a Trump acolyte and Trump cultist. To the point where Russian propagandist, Russian television, Skabieva, is saying that this is our Johnson. Listen to what the Russians are saying. It's not me as being some kind of pro-Democrat, like anti-Trumpist here. This is what the Russians are saying. Meanwhile, Russian state TV experts discuss Mike Johnson's meeting with Trump as a deciding factor in whether Ukraine will receive stalled US funding. Referring to Mike Johnson, state TV host Olga Skabieva claimed him as theirs, just like Trump. Fun to see Russian state TV cheering on the GOP these days. That would be our Johnson, she says. And it's what they've said about Trump before. Just, if you are still a fan of Mike Johnson and Donald Trump with regard to Ukraine, just think about what Russians are saying. The Speaker of the House, this is Jane Kiev, of Representatives, pushing the verbatim Russian troll factory narrative that illegal aliens can vote. The US is now a massive conduit of Kremlin disinformation. And this is a sort of disinformation that is spread by Russian trolls, and it is now being spouted by Mike Johnson.
That is responsible for regulating federal elections. Congress has this responsibility. We cannot wait for widespread fraud to occur, especially when the threat of fraud is growing with every single illegal immigrant that crosses that border.
And of course, illegal immigrants and widespread voter fraud are not a thing, but they're connecting to things that are talking points for them, that are also Russian talking points that sows discord in the American electorate. And Mike Johnson is doing the job of Russian propagandists. The widespread fraud is Putin's ability to run candidates in US elections who advance the Kremlin's agenda, are proxies in hybrid warfare against the West, and threaten the US Constitution and global security. Johnson and Trump are two examples of Kremlin's many successes. according to Alexandra Chalupa. And I thought this was quite interesting. Michael McKay is very big on the rhetoric. Moscow's men, Trump and Johnson, by their sabotage of good governance in the United States, they betrayed Avdiivka to the enemy. Russia's next target is Chasiv Yar. Failing to bring these men to account for their treason is deadly to Ukrainians and soul-destroying to Americans. But it's what Mike Singleton here says. Watch Trump carefully. He's completely lost it. He hovers over Mike Johnson, stares at him, then stares off into space aimlessly while swaying and looking unfocused. Then his eyelids droop and he can barely keep his eyes open. He needs help. Actually, I know this is might seem a bit petty, but when you look at Trump here, just I do wonder about him and that look on his face, and really, what's he actually thinking? Is he thinking anything?
93, the National Voter Registration Act, we call it the Motor Voter Law, allows people to sign up to vote when they get a driver's license.
I don't know. It just, looking at me, just, I don't know. I have a very poor opinion of the man, obviously, but I just don't think. I think he's pretty vacuous. I don't think he has anything to offer other than what the Kremlin wants. Anyway, moving on briefly, sort of. Even if the US House gets around to approving aid to Ukraine next week, says Phillips O'Brien, they have allowed Russia a large window of opportunity to do great damage to Ukrainian infrastructure. The House has directly abetted Putin's war effort. This is Radoslav Sikorski talking to CNN here, and he's the foreign minister of
just a few hours
Poland,
ago, I spoke with
and he married to Anne Applebaum. He is absolutely on point in everything he says, and I'm going to play all of this to you.
Just a few hours ago, I spoke with Poland's foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski. He condemned the attacks on Ukraine's infrastructure, calling them a war crime. He tells me that it's almost too late to stop Putin in Ukraine, and the stakes are only getting higher.
Slightly sped up.
First of all, it's a war crime. It is forbidden to attack civilian infrastructure. And secondly, this was a long time coming. Ukrainian authorities have been warning us that they are running out of effectors for their anti-missile systems, and they've been begging US Congress to pass the supplemental for the effectors to be delivered. And now we have the result. One after another, a Ukrainian power station is being destroyed. Soon Ukrainian cities will be out of electricity. I expect a big wave of refugees.
And of course, this is, as we see a more emboldened Putin, we see Ukraine at a critical juncture. Only yesterday, speaking to our Fred Replykin, President Zelensky, appealing, as you quite rightly said, for more weapons from the West, and critically from the United States. Now, you said recently, I'm going to read it out, you said, although I am Poland's foreign minister, my wife, as some of you know, is American. But most of you may not know that our son is actually an American soldier. My heart and duty are therefore with Poland, but my interest lies also in keeping America prosperous and confident enough to stay faithful to its allies. I wonder then, Foreign Minister, when you travel to the United States, when you speak to congressmen in the United States, what is your message? What are you telling them about the funding and the importance of unlocking this funding for Ukraine?
I tell them exactly what I'm about to tell you right now, which is that the President of the United States went to Kiev in wartime and assured the people of Ukraine and its president that the United States will do whatever it takes to sustain Ukraine in its resistance against Russian aggression. The whatever it takes surely includes anti-missiles, artillery, and rockets to defend Ukrainian cities. And I appeal again to Speaker Johnson to let democracy decide in the US Congress, to let this matter up for a vote so that the money and the equipment can reach Ukraine. If it doesn't, the Russians will do more destruction, and the United States' credibility will be at stake.
Yeah, and I mean, this is important because you did say recently that success in Ukraine is now a matter of US credibility. I suppose it's a signal as well to the rest of NATO allies if this money, if this aid doesn't come through. I mean, we have an election year, as you well know, in the United States. How is Poland preparing if by any chance, the former president, President Trump, comes into power? How is it preparing for that likelihood?
Well, we've been spending 2% of GDP on defense for the last 15 years. We are spending now close to 4% of GDP on defense. And in fact, I have to tell you, Europe, the European Union and its member states have spent double what the United States has spent on helping Ukraine. We are often suspected in the United States, including in Congress, of being free riders. Well, on this one, we have done the right thing. We now need the United States to do what the President of the United States has promised.
And ouch, that really hurts because, of course, that's what Trump keeps saying. And he said it again at that press conference. And he said that the Europeans need to start paying more and then, then we'll be happy to sort of give loans. It's like, no. You need to pay more. Because the Europeans are paying double what the Americans are paid. And as I said in the last video, either Trump is ignorant or he's lying. And none of those are good for the President of the United States in the position he's in, advocating what he's advocating. It's exceptionally dangerous.
And are you confident that the US will come through, Foreign Minister?
We've had false dawns before. And the fact of the matter is that this supplemental has been languishing in Congress since August last year. Since August last year, equipment has not been getting through to Ukraine.
I sense frustration in your voice.
Ukraine, well, my frustration is nothing, I can assure you, by comparison with what the President of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine feel, because it's they who are being bombarded.
It's disgusting. I'm so angry still. US and UK united in sanctions against Russia's metals industry. The legislation prohibits the import of aluminium, copper and nickel, limits the use of metals of Russian origin on global exchanges. Good news, they need to tighten those sanctions and restrictions against Russia, but it's all about stopping what is going from China to Russia. That is the big thing right now. Okay. On top of the problem with the Republican or the MAGA wing and the Trump wing of the Republican Party with stopping aid getting to Ukraine, we also have an anti-escalation movement within the Biden administration. And we had Lloyd Austin and his Assistant Secretary, Dr. Wallander, coming out and saying, well, we're concerned about the hitting of these oil refineries. There's been a piece, there's a couple of things that are worthy of note. The first is, actually, before we go to the piece in Euromaidan Press, let's go to what the International Energy Agency have said, cautioning that the recent surge in Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil refineries poses a risk to global petroleum product markets. Ukrainian drones have intensified attacks on Russian oil industry to disrupt fuel supplies in the military and reduce Kremlin revenue. The IEA's monthly report estimates that up to 500,000 to 600,000 barrels per day of Russia's crude processing capacity could be offline this quarter, potentially leading to a significant loss in Russian oil product exports. The IEA's concerns echo US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's earlier warning about potential knock-on effects of Russian attacks and global energy market. My initial go-to was this was an economic argument. And then I was speaking to Jonathan Fink. He said he had spoken to a few kind of experts, you Ben Hodges type people that said, actually, I think it's the anti-escalation movement in the administration that is causing people like Lloyd Austin and Wallander to come out and say this. This theory is actually it's going back to the economic argument and not the anti-escalation argument. And there is some serious lobbying going on here, according to one expert. The Euromaidan article bases... Well, their article is about this chap, Mikhailo Honchar, Ukrainian energy analyst, who says the big oil behind America's criticism of Ukrainian strikes on Russian refineries is what is holding the Americans back, certainly in their rhetoric. Those attacks, said Lloyd Austin the other day, could have a knock-on effect in terms of the global energy situation. Ukraine is better served in going after tactical and operational targets than that can directly influence the current fight. So the article says, let's not touch on the fact that Russia's shared share of global gasoline and diesel exports is relatively small at 1 and 3% respectively. In other words, even if Russian exports disappeared overnight, there would be no disaster. Instead, let's focus on the real issue at hand. What is driving Austin's position? Ukrainian energy expert Mikhailo Honchar has analysed the situation and identified several factors that may be influencing Austin's stance. Euromaidan Press has summarised Honchar's main arguments and reached out to him for clarification to provide readers with a comprehensive perspective on the issue. So the issue isn't the global marketplace for all those refined goods, but actually other things connected. So, according to Honchar, the real issue at hand is an increase in American gasoline prices. However, he argues that the problem does not lie in Ukraine's strikes on Russian refineries, but rather in US policy in the Middle East. For several months, a US-led coalition has struggled to deal with the Houthis in Yemen, whose attacks on oil tankers in the Red Sea have forced them to use longer and more expensive routes. Quote, crude oil and fuel markets are different. Oil is not poured into tanks, only its refined products, diesel, gasoline and jet fuel are. Therefore, Austin's assertion is absurd. He is shifting the blame to Ukraine due to the Pentagon's inability to put an end to the Houthis, Honchar told Euromaidan Press. Honchar suggested that Lloyd Austin's change in stance may be the result of pressure from external influences. Of course, there's lots of mays and coulds. He believes that Russia exerts its influence on the US through American oil giants ExxonMobil and Chevron. In 2020, which doesn't surprise me at all, having read several books on this kind of stuff. In 2022, these companies reported revenues of $235 billion and $413 billion respectively, far surpassing Ukraine's GDP of $160 billion. So both companies exceed Ukraine's entire GDP. These corporations maintain... So, if you're thinking about a nation lobbying another nation, so a nation coming to the US and say, look, we think you need to do this rather than that. Like, each of these companies has more power than individual nations in terms of their economic clout in the political scene. So, get a sense of that. These individual corporations have bigger economic clout than indeed the entirety of Ukraine as a country. By a margin. In fact, Chevron over double. So, these corporations maintain powerful lobbies with US administrations regardless of who occupies the White House. Honchar says, and they are also known for participating in large-scale oil production projects in Kazakhstan since the 1990s, especially Chevron. Kazakhstan's oil is transported to global markets via the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC pipeline, which runs primarily through Russia and is operated by the Russian monopoly Transneft. So we have American fossil fuels industrial entities that rely on Russian oil infrastructure to make their money, or at least some of their money. This arrangement allows Russia to control the flow of oil from American companies in Kazakhstan, potentially using it as leverage to influence US policy. Quote from Honchar, Russia strictly controls the oil flow of American companies from Kazakhstan. The message is clear. If you want to keep your profits, American oil guys, then act in a way that benefits both the United States and Russia. Otherwise, Russia, will turn off the oil tap. Chevron's Tengiz oil and gas field in Kazakhstan, developed through the Tengiz-Chevroil joint venture with Chevron, is a significant source of revenue for the company. Chevron continues to expand production and has invested over $40 billion in a new phase of field development. Previously, industry analysts warned that CPC pipeline route and the Tengiz-Chevroil joint venture were vulnerable to potential Russian retaliation against Western sanctions imposed in response to the invasion of Ukraine. However, Chevron is not concerned about it. Quote from Honchar, it is easier for Chevron to resolve the issue through their lobbyists in Washington than to diversify export routes for Kazakh oil bypassing Russia. So they have a choice of, right, okay, so Russia can turn off our oil with relative ease going through from Kazakhstan through Russia. So we can either spend all these billions of dollars creating an alternative route, but that's very difficult knowing the region and Ukraine itself being in the way, and all that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. Or we can lobby the US to get things done that will please Russia. Furthermore, Lloyd Austin's Assistant Secretary of, because, money rules and morality doesn't. Furthermore, Lloyd Austin's Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security, Celeste Wallander, was appointed just a week after the Biden-Putin summit in Geneva in 2021. Previously, Wallander served as President and CEO of the US-Russia Foundation from 2017, and she's been somewhat weak, it appears, in standing up to Russia in what her rhetoric was about those oil refineries. And indeed, Honchar sets out the Kremlin's influence mechanism can be broken down into the following steps. So, one, the Kremlin via Transneft amicably, so that's the pipelines, amicably requests Chevron to work with Washington. Two, Chevron mobilizes its lobbyists, formulating and assigning tasks, along with a cover operation to remain behind the scenes. 3. The lobbyists approach government agencies with specific instructions and a draft of the appropriate messages to be conveyed to Ukraine. 4. Government agency spokespersons then deliver these appropriate messages. The Biden team, needing to build an election fund, has increased interest in additional donations. For the Kremlin, this is an effective way to elegantly corrupt a geopolitical adversary, turning the US into a passive accomplice through the red lines it sets for Ukraine. Honchar summarizes, questioning whether there will be an anti-corruption investigation into this matter. So the Kremlin's influence on the White House through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC, is a complex mechanism, and it does involve several steps. And Transneft is that opening one, which is the Russian state-owned company headed by Nikhailo Tokarev, a former KGB colleague of Putin, has paid dividends to CPC shareholders, including Chevron and ExxonMobil subsidiaries. In 2023, CPC shareholders received a total of $1.34 billion in dividends, with Chevron Caspian Pipeline Consortium Company receiving 15% and Mobil Caspian Pipeline Company receiving 7.5%. So the connections to Moscow there, to the Kremlin, are also evident. And this could be far more at play. There's lots of coulds and maybes, but it's certainly very plausible that this could be at play more than the anti-escalation, that there are some serious economic pressures being put on the Biden administration. And finally, security in Kosovo has been ramped up amid growing fears that Serbia's President Vucic is planning an invasion aided by his ally Vladimir Putin. And of course, this would be the prime time to get stuff happening there, because everyone's attention is diverted. China is going to start doing things, and in fact, there's talk about rumblings, Indo-Pacific rumblings, because it's all going a bit wrong at the moment, and that is also manifesting in political chaos in the US, because it's an election year, so that's chaotic enough. But when you've got all this divisive rhetoric being amplified by the Kremlin that is playing so well to the MAGA Republican ears, it's just a nightmare. And people's attentions are diverted to those issues, domestic issues or other international issues, the Israel-Gaza problem, the Houthis in Yemen, Red Sea trade, Ukraine, Russia. So this is your time to cause problems if you are any other nefarious entity. And, you can look to China to be part of that. And then, of course, you've got Russia's involvement in Africa. And China's Belt and Road Initiative also taking its toll as far as the American hegemony is concerned in places like Africa and Asia. So, yeah, it's not a good look at the moment. And I'll tell you what, the problems come from Russia, but they are being imported into the US by the likes of Trump, MTG, and Mike Johnson. And it doesn't look like anything's changing my mind on that. It's just, every day is confirming my worst fears. Every day we are seeing Russian influence in America grow. This is exceptionally worrying. You should be worried. I am worried. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon. Although the last thing I will say, the good news not good news, but I'm quite stoked. I'm going to have an interview with Sean Pinner, who was tortured by the Russians after being captured during the conflict. He's a British soldier, former British soldier. So I'll be interviewing him, and also Paul Conroy, who is a photojournalist who's worked in Syria, worked with Marie Colvin and in fact got injured when she died as a reporter in Homs, doing amazing work in Homs to show the world the horrors that are taking place there. Oh, Russia involved there. And he's been in Kherson recently. He's out and about around Ukraine quite often, and I'll be interviewing him as well at some point. So that's really good news. But otherwise, yeah, things pretty much suck. Speak soon.